Hey everyone, this is Colin May, professor at Stevenson University. Today we are going to be talking about the physical evidence collection methodology. For a number of years, students have been asking me to address some of the issues that they see or want to talk about in terms of crime scene collection and how it impacts the kind of day-to-day life. So we're going to be talking about this today. The need for proper recognition, collection, and preservation of physical evidence is an absolutely critical component to any investigation. Physical evidence can directly or indirectly lead to the solving of crime, the identification of a suspect, the ultimate resolution of the dispute. Charging and prosecutorial decisions are usually affected by the quality of the physical evidence that supports the case. So it's really important for an investigator to fully understand the ramifications of all the actions, the process in identifying, receiving, and safeguarding the valuable physical evidence. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing the importance of properly safeguarding, documenting, and collecting evidence. Now, it's not meant to replace professional training in evidence collection or agency process, policy, or procedure, but is really just more of a very basic high-level overview for students in physical evidence collection. So, of course, the importance of evidence certainly can't be understated. I mean, if there's no evidence, there's really no case. Really, the essence of information derived from it depends entirely on the care with which the evidence has been protected from contamination, damage, degradation, or intentional tampering. If evidence has been improperly collected, handled, or stored, its value has been destroyed and the credibility along with it, and the case is over. I like this quote from the Army's field manual. Generally, the art of investigation lies in gathering and evaluating information and evidence, both testimonial and physical. So that's really the important part. So, you always want to look at what is the evidence, what's the story, what does it mean, and why is it relevant? Any attempts to tamper with or insert people who shouldn't be there into a crime scene is problematic. So the goal is to maintain the integrity of the evidence, maintain the integrity of the scene. You want to attempt to freeze the scene as closely to possible as possible to the condition in which it was originally found. People shouldn't be needlessly moving in or moving out, taking unnecessary information or pictures or anything like that. They certainly shouldn't be altering the scene. Whoever is there, victims or witnesses, need to be isolated and removed from the scene so that they do not purposefully or inadvertently destroy evidence. The integrity and preservation of a scene is absolutely paramount. I mean, if you watch the TV shows, they've got it all wrong. There's just no way that all those people coming in, coming out, there's no record. It's really problematic. So you want to be able to protect against loss, contamination, deterioration, cross transfer with other evidence, other crime scenes potentially, other cases, or suspect to victim or victim to suspect. Okay. If you can't show that the scene wasn't tampered with or the evidence wasn't tampered with, the defense has the ability to pretty much attack everything, including your credibility, and that becomes a real problem from a career perspective. So again, safety is always paramount. Physical safety, protection against things like vehicle scenes, or passing vehicles if the crime scene's on the side of a road. Safety is absolutely first, always does. Then you also need to be cognizant of the evidence itself, especially if the area is a crime scene. If it's unsecured or uncontrolled, we kind of talked about that earlier. The evidence can be lost, it can be stolen, it can be destroyed intentionally or unintentionally, or it could be just rendered unusable. So, for example, in a death investigation in a motel room, let's say, that evidence could be ruled inadmissible by a judge like 3 years later if the crime scene was contaminated by an EMT, first responder, firefighter, police, whoever came into the room, and it wasn't properly documented. Okay. Anyone who comes into a crime scene has to be there, has to have a reason to be there, a good reason, a professional reason, a duty reason, a specific duty that requires them to be on scene. And of course, a log of who comes in and who comes out is absolutely critical for accountability. So let's talk about some of the basic principles, okay? So first of all, we're going to kind of skew this presentation a little bit towards the fraud cases, white-collar crime cases, since that's really the overview of this entire course. But in any event, it doesn't really matter. There's so much evidence available out there. It's multiple types, it's multiple places, it's not even necessarily in the actual, quote-unquote crime scene itself. So all of these things need to be gathered, analyzed, and then safeguarded and used in the investigation. In many cases, it always depends on the facts. And then what are the legal avenues available to actually acquire that evidence? Okay. Specific types of evidence may require specialized handling or processing. Things like computers are a great example these days. You always want to consult with the authority, the expert, the agency policy. There are lots of different areas out there that have really good information as well. Some of the specialized evidence collection types could include computers and electronics, which we just mentioned, firearms, drugs, narcotics, biological material, or hazardous waste. We obviously won't go into details into any of those, because really those are the province of other courses, both in the forensic studies program as well as the forensic science program. But in this video, we will try to cover some of the fraud cases and specifically the documents that make up fraud cases and recovery of cash. So again, I can't overemphasize this. The security of the scene is absolutely a must. Whoever is coming into the scene, the contamination has to be minimized. Any disturbance will cause a problem down the road. I guarantee it. You want to be able to make sure that police and the first responders can get there and secure the scene. But then after that, they really need to be able to keep people out, and that's really what it boils down to. So crime scene security is essential. You can't lose, or don't want to lose, trace evidence just based on people tramping in. That's why a perimeter is so important. And the only people who should be there are those who have a specific job and a absolute duty requirement to be there. Okay. People shouldn't be there, even your boss, to just go ahead and look around. That's just not acceptable. Okay. They can do that after all the photographs have been taken, and things like that. We'll get to that in a minute here. So processing the scene. So once the scene is safe and secure, it must be thoroughly documented. And you want to think of it like this. Once the matter comes to trial, say, I don't know, in 7 or 10 years, potentially, hopefully not, but it has happened, you want to be accurate and be able to intelligently transport the jury back to that scene, back to the day it happened, back to what the first officer saw when they arrived, things like that. That will help immensely to make the case. Okay, this is where photography, videos are very important. You may have seen some of these on TV and in true crime shows where they actually do a walkthrough with a video, and in some cases narrate it. In some cases probably that's not always a good idea, but a walkthrough shows exactly how things were. It's also important to photograph any evidence in its place. You'll see like this photograph here. In a white-collar crime context, it's a best practice to photograph and video the scene right after the securing of a location, for example, at a search warrant. You want to be able to video the location after the warrant has been completed as well, because this guards against claims of potential trash or destruction of property, things like that, potential claims that could be made. So the documentation of a crime scene is really important. It's not just every single piece of evidence, but it's also the scene overall. Without the documentation, you only have a collection basically of junk, unfortunately, and that does not advance the cause of justice. And that's why we stress over and over documentation is critical. A well-documented scene ensures both the integrity of an investigation, but also provides that permanent record that the court can rely on, that the jury can rely on, that other investigators who can rely on 20 years later after you've retired, who go back to the archives on a cold case or an inactive case or something like that. And of course, obviously, it also is critical to help in the report writing process and certainly in court testimony. So organizing a search area is also the other key piece, and this happens in both physical locations as well as search warrants, executions of search warrants at businesses. Depending on the location and the search, there may be a number of ways to organize it, and it really boils down to what works best for you, for the team, given the facts, where things are at. A thorough, systematic, detailed search is critical. My belief is the best way to search it is, especially in the white-collar context, the sector search method, which is the next slide. So let's talk about sector searching. This is, again, the most likely to be used in a white collar. So if you're conducting a search warrant in a business, you think of each room in the business as a separate room number, and that's assigned for both identification and control. So there's a reception area, which is, say, area A, Mr. Johnson's office. Mr. Johnson is the owner, but also the subject target of the investigation. His office is area B, the break room is area C, etc., etc. So even though the break room is probably not likely to contain any evidence, it should still be searched, and that search should still be documented by who did it and what, if anything, they found. Of course, this presumes that you have the general ability to search under the warrant, and so if the warrant constricts you to only authorized areas, then you need to keep to those areas for searching or execution of the search warrant only. They can, of course, still be secured and looked at for persons that may be there. So you can assign each room to certain investigators. 2 investigators should always search an area. Once it's complete, the investigator can sign off that it has been done, and it's countersigned by the other investigator. And then, of course, if there is evidence that's found, one evidence is the witness who finds the actual evidence, and the second investigator is the witness of the discovery of that evidence. Once all of the documents and evidence are collected, properly documented and accounted for, packed in a special box or other safe packaging, then it should be brought to the custodian of evidence, who will enter it into the agency's inventory. Packaging evidence helps correctly identify the evidence with respect to where it came from, what its origin is, then what is it with a description. You also want a unique identifier so it can't be confused with any other evidence, both in the lab and other cases. You can indicate what processing may need to be done or you would like done by the crime lab or by other investigators, and if there are any safety or health hazards. Okay, these include things like guns, knives, or biological issues. I just want to say this is a photograph of a search warrant that I was at. It was actually a multi location search warrant with the FBI, the Department of Commerce, and the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. The case eventually went to trial, and the subject was found guilty. But the gentleman on the left was my partner, just a fantastic person, great guy. I learned a lot from him. I was actually not at this location. I was at a second location, and we found a lot of neat stuff at that location. So it was a lot of fun. I miss those days. So this is a chart that kind of shows a little bit of what types of packaging can be used for different types of things. It's usually dictated by what type of evidence, the condition, and the examination that you require. This is from the Oregon State Police Crime Lab, and it, again, kind of shows you exactly what you want. Things need to be in different places or different packages, but of course all packaging should be clean and unused, and once an evidence item is finished, all that information and packaging should be discarded properly. A proper seal also ensures that evidence is not altered or compromised or has been accessed without specific authorization. Sealed evidence should always be initialed, and the seal should be tamper-proof. And of course, I always like to put the initials over the seal in a way that also goes onto the package, so you can truly see there's a break if that's opened. Okay, so that's that. There are a lot of good resources if you have specific questions, such as the FBI laboratory website has a lot of great information on packaging, as well as many of the state police crime labs. So this is a great photo. I love this photo on the right. That's a problem. Don't do that. Most documentary evidence should be preserved in an envelope. In some cases, like with a search warrant of a business, like a couple slides back, those are going to be the boxes. I mean, there's just no other way. But for the most part, if you're working on an audit, given some piece of evidence that should adequately be maintained as evidence, you should consider using a special envelope like the one marked above. I've also used plastic page protectors since they can be just as useful, but you do want to be careful that you don't immediately put it in an a enveloped marked evidence in front of a person you receive it from, just because it could cause some potential anxiety. So wait till you get to the car. It's okay. Property tags or evidence tags are also important. The first person who assumes custody of evidence should mark it for future identification. The marking will usually consist of a time, date, and the initials of the receiver. Of course, you want to prevent cross-contamination as well, but if there is no practical way to mark something, then obviously you can put a tag with it. You can put the container and mark the container. These are always useful to have. I always like to have a number of these around, just to make life a lot easier. Of course, it should always have the case number, detailed description of what the evidence actually is, the location from where it was recovered, the person that recovered it, the date and time of recovery, and if it was packaged, so say it was found by one investigator but packaged by a second one, then you would want to make that note as well. So again, this is if you're familiar with many of the television shows, this is what they don't show. This is an evidence and a property custody record. This always is filled out. It's one of the most important pieces of information for the evidence collection chain of what's called chain of custody. And of course, the other is a receipt for the evidence obtained that is then given to the person from whom it was received. So in the search warrant example, we would leave an inventory with the people that we executed the search warrant at that showed exactly what we took from where. We called it an inventory. So again, these forms are just absolutely critical. It's a person-to-person accounting in the chain of custody who has actually handled the evidence. And theoretically, every person who touched a piece of evidence could be called to testify as to what they did with the item, how they handled it, what they did with it. It's important to be accurate and detailed in the description of the item, and in the next slide we'll go ahead and see exactly what this means. So this is again a description of an item. Each item should be identified by number, item number, quantity, and description. The description should be very detailed, such as that an independent person who has no knowledge will be able to accurately identify it. So for example, a .38 caliber handgun is described by make, model, serial number, condition, any unusual marks or scratches or color, any special conditions or issues, and value. So you'll see there that first item number 1, it's a quantity. It was also obtained from a location inside a pickup truck with a VIN number. It could also have a license plate attached to that, and obviously the fact that it was parked at 9988 Harris Drive on Fort Belvoir is important, because again, that ties it all together. So that's a revolver, Colt brand, .38 caliber, 2-inch barrel, black in color, metal type construction with scuffed brown, wooden type hand grips, bearing manufacturer serial markings there. So you'll again see that's a very long description, and that's the kind of stuff that needs to happen. If it's not there, it will potentially be thrown out, and you don't want that. Documents are, of course, the underlying evidence in most fraud cases. They can be used to help pretty much do anything. Identify the source of it, identify the machines that produced it, or look at any information as to how it was created or altered. So here in document collection, again, if there are, on the back, you can write your name, make your initials, date and time it was received. But again, I mean, if you're getting boxes and boxes, you're not going to do that for every single piece of paper. That's just crazy. But you can do the boxes and things like that. Don't cut, fold, tape, alter, staple. That's bad. Usually make a photocopy or a digital copy immediately upon receiving it. Cache is another great area that people don't often talk about. So cache has been found to be handled improperly in just tons of cases, unfortunately. A recent case also alleged that a now former FBI agent who was responsible for accepting and inventorying cache, who located at search warrant sites, then embezzled the funds to his own personal benefit. So it's just a sad commentary that you kind of can't trust anybody. So this is why you always want to employ the two-person rule, that count and double count all funds to ensure that they are properly accounted for. You also want to photograph or photocopy the cache and record the serial numbers if it's feasible for a small amount of cash. Cash should be placed in a sealed envelope, deposited into a special agency authorized bank account or fund as soon as possible, usually within 2 hours or the next business day, but should be safeguarded throughout. So the front of the envelope here should be filled out by a currency denomination. So if the cash count was $179, you can break it down into that was one $100 bill, say 2 20s, et cetera, et cetera. And again, a second person can verify the count, and then of course any discrepancy can be resolved right there. So as we're winding down, there are 4 questions that are really important to think about. So the first is, why are we taking this into evidence? What is it? So the first is related to deciding what to take into evidence. Sometimes we don't really need it, but sometimes we may think it's not important, but it ends up being very important. Think about what is needed to prove or disprove the elements of the offense. If it's not immediately recognizable as evidence, is there the possibility that it could eventually be useful at some point in the future? The second is a fundamental question. So are we, based on our authority, agency, position, and purpose, legally authorized to seize this evidence? It will obviously be very different in so many different scenarios, but it really comes down to thinking about the Fourth Amendment. This is where knowing the law, the rules of evidence, the rules of criminal procedure, as well as your own organization's authorities, policies, procedures, and guidelines is critical. If we don't have legal authority to seize the evidence, the case is going to lose. It's going to fail. Third, we also want to make sure we've properly collected the evidence in a way that safeguards the evidentiary value. You want to make sure that nothing has been lost, altered, destroyed, or significantly degraded. You also want to ensure that the proper collection and handling, as well as packaging methods, have been utilized to prevent any contamination, mishandling, or misappropriation. It should always be in an appropriate container and sealed by the investigator that actually handled it. And then, of course, finally, is the chain of custody correct and properly followed? Have all the documentation been adequately filled out? Are there proper evidence handling, storage, and safeguarding processes, and have they been followed? If not, the court could exclude the evidence based on the argument the evidence may have been tampered with or significantly altered. And of course that always becomes the reasonable doubt. So wrapping up here, all physical evidence obtained in the course of an investigation must be inventoried and accounted for on a specific form. In the video today, we've discussed the important role that this all plays in criminal investigations, but any investigation. The importance of chain of custody, properly recording the physical evidence, all the issues surrounding identification tags and chain of custody forms. These are all good areas, good issues. Again, this is a high-level overview. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any further questions, let me know, and we can answer them. Go ahead and post them to the discussion board. Thanks a lot, and have a good day.